Preakness Stakes 2025. The Preakness Prospectus is now out and available. You can look for it here in the chat. I did put a link, and you can also look for it in the description. But the Preakness Prospectus 2025, it's similar to the Kentucky Derby Prospectus in that we have some variables for handicapping the Kentucky Derby. And of course, we'll be building upon this prospectus in future years. But the Preakness Stakes is handicapped a lot differently than the Kentucky Derby. But the conditions and the horses entering the Preakness Stakes, the last few years, we're getting more new shooters. We're getting less Kentucky Derby horses. And overall, we're getting a little bit different class level of horses that are starting to enter the Preakness Stakes. And so as we start to handicap, you've got to account for the improving 3-year-old. Now, we do come into this year's Preakness Stakes with 6 straight favorites that have lost the Preakness Stakes. And let's take a look at the Preakness Prospectus. Again, you start off with the homepage, and the first tab is the 2025 runners. We have the post positions, the winner from the last post position, the morning line. So the winner from post position number 1, goal oriented, the last winner from that post is National Treasure in 2023. From the second post is Cloud Computing in 2017, California Chrome from post position number 3. Then we've got Swiss Skydiver, early voting, Rombauer, Justify from post position 7, Funny Side from post position 8, all the way back in 2023, and Gosger out of post position 9. The last winner was 1998 with Real Quiet. Now, Gosger 20-1, early Pay Billy 20-1, Heart of Honor at 10-1, and then Journalism, the morning line favorite at 8-5. So though that's a little bit, again, you can scroll over and see the trainer. This year's trainer records for the Preakness Stakes, we've got Bob Baffert with 8 Preakness wins, 26 Preakness starters. D. Wayne Lucas, 48 Preakness starters. He's got 7 Preakness wins. Then Mark Casse has got a win, and Steve Asmussen with a couple of Preakness winners. And then the jockey records. Now we've got 4 jockeys riding in the Preakness Stakes for the first time this year. We've got Umberto Rispoli, Nick Juarez, Safi Osborne, and Raul Mena. Those are some of the jockeys riding in the first time for the Preakness Stakes in 2025. And then we've got some other jockeys that have already run. John Velasquez, 1 for 13. We've got Jose Ortiz, 1 for 5. Mike Smith, 2 for 19. And also, we have a couple of jockey changes on for the first time. We've got Sandman, who gets John Velasquez for the first time, a switch from the Kentucky Derby. And then Gosger with Luis Saez. So a little bit of a different change. And then one of the things that still holds consistent is 2-year-old racing form. Not a lot of horses that did not run as a 2-year-old. We're only 2 weeks after the Derby. So a lot of times you still want that juvenile foundation in the Kentucky Derby. So that's why it's still important. Also for the queer and speed points, you always got to be on the lookout for horses that might be able to try to steal the race. Speed does well in the Preakness Stakes as well. We have 2 horses with 8 queer and speed points. We got Pay Billy and Clever Again. Pay Billy with a couple of wins at Laurel. Clever Again riding a 2-race win streak at Oaklawn Park, shipping here to Pimlico. And then the running style, presser, sustained, whether they're a new shooter, and the final prep. Now that's the 2025 data. The pedigree data, again, a lot similar to the Kentucky Derby Prospectus. You're looking for a strong female family in those first 2 generations. For the average winning distance, Something to note, the mare on Clever Again, average dams for Galileo, a strong distance sire, 10.5 furlongs, a very low dosage. And the mare was a grade 3 stakes winner, ran long on the turf, 1.5 miles, 1 3/4 miles. She won on the turf going long. So Clever Again with some strong female distance pedigree on that female side. And then the dosage profile. Then we've got the speed figures. Fastest Brisnet, again, always looking for Brisnets over 101 coming in, and a buyer speed figure of 95. I did do a speed figure pattern on the Brisnet. You know, again, you're always looking for horses that are going to pair up and then maybe progress forward in the Preakness Stakes. And then the speed figure progression video is out. I did put, you know, kind of depends on the speed figure that you're losing for your speed figure progression. Goal-oriented, turning around on 14 days. He went from a 98 Brisnet to a 104. River Thames had those back-to-back 99s, regressed a little bit in the bluegrass, but now gets 39 days off. And then Journalism, you know, that 108 in the Santa Anita Derby is kind of the outlier. Otherwise, he's kind of sitting on a pair, 95, 104, 102. And then the days off, we've got 4 horses turning around on a 14-day turnaround. American Promise, Journalism, and Sandman all coming around on a 14-day turnaround. Goal-oriented from a allowance race on Derby Day to the Preakness Stakes. He had 27 days off after that first race of his career. So George says, watch out for Mania for a jockey. Silver Charm says, wouldn't be surprised if he wins with American Promise. Yeah, you know, American Promise, kind of an interesting horse in this race. Now, I did put their maximum Brisnet speed figure in this race because, again, lightly raced horses have a better chance of improving. So once you get to 8 or 9 races, you don't have as much of an improvement in you. American Promise has run 10 times. That's why I put a little bit of a shade of red. Sandman with 9 career races, Pay Billy with 8. I don't think there's as much room for improvement on those horses. Then we got the top speed figure of 2025. Journalism with a 108 and a 102. Clever Again right there on a buyer speed figure of a 101 in the Hot Springs. And then the top Brisnet speed figure, Journalism again with a 108. American Promise with a 105. But that was a 1-turn mile. And overall, goal-oriented with a 104 in an allowance race. And then the Arkansas Derby, Sandman got that one. Now, favorites come in the last few years. They've lost 6 straight Preakness races in a row. Favorites have won 11 of the last 25, but they're only 3 of the last 11. Justify and American Pharaoh both won the Triple Crown. So if you kind of throw them out, you're kind of left with California Chrome. And then Bodemeister was second, Animal Kingdom second. Then we had a string of favorites, but a lot of those were trained by Bob Baffert, who seems to get his horses to turn around quickly from the Derby to the Preakness. They're usually a little bit more of a speed-based type horse. Horses that have come off the pace in the Derby haven't done as well in the Preakness. Horses like Mage, Epicenter, also horses like Orb, they've kind of flattened out, and Street Sense as well ran second in the Preakness Stakes. Now, prep history, it does help to have a little bit of class here in the Preakness Stakes. What this chart shows you is that even though they may be a new shooter, Seize the Gray dropped out of a grade 2 Pat Day Mile. National Treasure came in from a grade 1 Santa Anita Derby. Early Voting was in the Wood Memorial Stakes. Cloud Computing was in the Wood Memorial Stakes. And then even when the race was in October, Swiss Skydiver out of the Kentucky Oaks. The rest of these were all out of the Kentucky Derby. But I think with Seize the Gray winning last year and National Treasure out of the Santa Anita Derby and Early Voting out of the Wood Memorial, we're seeing a little bit more of a lightly raced horse come into the Preakness Stakes, a little bit different of a new shooter, and we've got less Derby horses. So the last few years, we're starting to see more new shooters and less Derby horses, and we're starting to see a little bit 6 straight years with a non-favorite winning for the Derby. So the other thing I did want to show you is the career starts. You know, Early Voting only had 3 career starts. That was Chad Brown. He went wire to wire. Cloud Computing only had 3 career starts. That was another Chad Brown horse. Both of those had speed. But otherwise, you're still seeing a trend of 5, 6, 6, 10. California Chrome had 11 starts. Oxbow. So I think if you like American Promise or Sandman, this chart kind of shows you that they can still get the job done. Now, one of the things that I tried to highlight in the Kentucky Derby and also in the Preakness Stakes is that horses can run a new top in the Preakness Stakes. So this chart is interesting. Seize the Gray last year improved. His previous high buyer speed figure was an 88. He improved by 12 points to win the Kentucky Derby. National Treasure improved by 1. Early Voting improved by 9 points. Rombauer improved by 14 points. And even Swiss Skydiver, when the race was in October, improved by 3 buyer speed points. War of Will improved by 4. So when you look at horses in the Preakness, even though they might only have, like Gosger has a 93, but if he were to improve by 7 or 8 speed figure points, that puts him right in the mix. That puts him at 100 speed figure. And I don't think journalism's really going to improve. He's turning around on 14 days rest. I think if journalism can get back to the 101, 102, that's really all they're looking to do. And then see, that's what I'm saying is I don't think journalism's really going to improve. I think he can get back to that 102 or a 101, but I don't think he's going to improve. So when you look at these speed figures, there's 2 or 3 horses that can improve by 7 or 8 points. One of them is Clever Again. Another one is Gosger. I believe a lightly raced horse like Goal Oriented can improve. So I think that's where people make a mistake is they think these horses are not going to improve. And then even with Brisnet speed figures, Seize the Gray improved by 13 points. We had Justify actually regressed. He went from a 114 in his allowance in his Santa Anita Derby, and he only won the Preakness with a 98. So basically, buyer allows for a little bit more improvement. And a lot of these horses that have won the Preakness on the Brisnet scale have either regressed a little bit or have kind of just held steady. War of Will just turned around. He had a 96 as his previous high. He ran a 95. American Pharaoh kind of just held steady with a 100. California Chrome kind of just held steady. There really isn't a John White strike system for the Preakness. I think next year I'm going to create a checklist, a Preakness checklist, and present that as our Preakness handicapping. But it's a good question, and I think we want to have kind of more of a checklist, yes or no, on some of these Preakness horses. So these are the different things that we're going to build on this prospectus. Try to have a little bit more data because, as I mentioned, I think we're seeing a little bit different type of horse. We're not seeing as many Kentucky Derby horses. go to the Preakness. And we're seeing different type of new shooters, lightly raced horses coming into the Preakness. So when you look at some of the past performances, when you we're going to add in some past performances here. And I wanted to add share the daily racing past performances. So when you look at a horse like Goal Oriented, he's lightly raced, only 2 starts, 2 wins, but he's turning around on 14 days. He's got a good pedigree. And when you look at a horse like this, Flavian Prat, like if you take that 91 and add 7 or 8 Beyer speed figure, that puts him at about a 98 or 99. Whereas Journalism, he's got a 102. He's got another 102. That San Felipe was his career top, a 108. Otherwise, he's got an 87, an 82, and a 72. So the San Felipe is really the outlier. He's going to probably run about a 100 speed figure, and that puts Goal Oriented right there. American Promise ran a 95 in the one-turn Virginia Derby. Heart of Honor kind of got about a 94 in the UAE Derby, but he ran these 3 straight 1-mile races in UAE. So I think he's capable of getting a 92 to a 95. Pay Billy has 8 races. Now he would have to improve by about 10 to 12 points. So I don't think Pay Billy can really improve that much. But River Thames, he got a 95 in the Fountain of Youth. He defeated Sovereignty. If he improves by 5 or 6 points, that puts him right at the 100 mark with Irad Ortiz. Sandman, again, he's got 9 starts, but he did have a 99 in the fast pace in the Arkansas Derby. I do think he had some foot issues going into the Derby. It looks like now we're going to get a fast track on Saturday. It's going to be high in the upper 80s. So I'm wondering about these horses turning around on a couple of weeks rest on a very hot, humid day. We might get a afternoon rain shower. It's going to be more late afternoon, early evening. These horses are going to be running without Lasix. So yes, glue-on shoe for Sandman in the last race, but he just never really seemed to really grab a hold of that track. So I think Sandman is the type of horse that he wants a fast track. Now, if we get a sloppy track on Saturday, you know, he may stay more at that 92 to 95 level. Clever again got a 101 Beyer speed figure in the Hot Springs. And the mare, I did want to point that out. Look at the mare. She ran 1.5 miles, 1 mile and 13/16, 1.5 miles. She won a grade 3 stakes at 1.5 miles. Clever again's got a half brother who ran nothing but miles out of Justify, $300,000. They paid for it. Galileo is the broodmare sire, so that's a lot of distance in the pedigree. And so I think Clever again, based on those speed figures, a 101, he could have, even if he just stays at that 101, that puts him right in the mix here and right there with Journalism. And then Gosger, his Brisnet speed figures are a little bit higher than his Beyer speed figures. I think the Lexington Beyer's a little on the low side. He defeated Praetor, and Praetor, out of that race, Hypnus came back on a sloppy track on Derby Day and ran an 89. So I think Gosger is capable of getting a 90 or 91 in this race. So I think that buyer speed figure for the Lexington's a little bit on the low side. I think the Brisnet speed figure is a little bit more accurate with a 93. So those are just a little bit of my opinions on the buyer speed figure here. And when you go back to the prospectus, when you look at the pedigrees, you see that even goal oriented, the mare was a grade 3 stakes winner. The second mare was a winner. Dam Sire is a Fleet Alex who won the Preakness. Overall female family is an A. Again, what you're looking for on the average winning distance is anything higher than 7.5. Now, the one thing with River Thames, his average winning distance on the sire side is 6.2. McLean's Music gets a lot of sprinters, but he already has produced a Preakness winner. He's got a pretty high dosage, but the average winning distance on the broodmare sire is actually higher than the sire side. So hopefully he adds a little bit of class from that female family. Alex says Sandman just hates Churchill Downs. Everything else should be fine. I heard about the new shoes. That doesn't worry him. Sloppy track would concern me. I think he kind of proved in the Derby he didn't like the sloppy track. He just never really seemed to fire. He was right behind Sovereignty, and Sovereignty did fire. Now, we did see a couple of horses on Derby Day out of Into Mischief fire really well. So I'm starting to put Into Mischief into kind of a sloppy track type of sire. And I think with a fast track, I think Sandman, they said he's over his foot issues, can come back and run a big race. Now, the glue-on shoes by itself isn't bad because the winner of the race, Sovereignty, had glue-on shoes. So I don't think, glue-on shoes by itself is a negative sign. But they were also changing the shoes in the paddock before the race on Coal Battle. And Coal Battle didn't run and really handle that track surface as well. So I think you kind of have to take a look at the shoes and the surface. And sometimes some horses just don't like a sloppy track. So right now they're saying temperatures are going to be in the upper 80s and it's going to be dry more in the afternoon. And we'll see. Now, the speed figure progression with the Brisnet speed figures, goal oriented is sitting on a career top 104, which is up from a 98 in his maiden race. And then you've got River Thames, who paired up that 99. Then he went to the Bluegrass and got a 96. But what I like about him is he's got 39 days off. And he had 38 days off going into the Bluegrass. So I think River Thames could be sitting on a big effort. And then same thing with Clever Again. He had a big gap after his one race as a 2-year-old. He had 308 days off. Then he had 35 days off. Now he gets 48 days off. And his Brisnet speed figure in his last race was a 99. So he went from a 77 as a 2-year-old to a 93 to a 99, and journalism's got a 102. So I think the big misconception, the way I'm handicapping this race, is I think journalism can win the race. I think he's going to be about 4 to 5. But I think some people think he's going to win this race by 4 to 5 lengths or 3 to 4 lengths. And he only beat Baeza by about a half a length. And Baeza almost caught him in the Kentucky Derby. So I think journalism, this is going to be a close race. So to me, I want a little bit of a price. So I'm taking Clever Again, but I also think you could make the case for River Thames. And I do think if it's a fast track, I think Sandman can get back to this 101. And Like Carl says, Sandman zigging and zagging down the Arkansas Derby lane. And there is a possibility journalism's tired. You know, he did. The one thing is journalism did ship to Churchill Downs late. He shipped the Thursday, 8 days out from the race. Then he shipped to Pimlico on Tuesday of this week. So he's shipping late again. Now, today he galloped on a sloppy track. He ran on a sloppy track. And I think running on a sloppy track takes a little bit out of you. So that's why I don't think journalism is going to peak here in the Preakness. I think he's probably going to run a 100 to 102. And I thought he ran a big race in the Derby, and I thought he got tired. I thought Baeza almost caught him right on the finish line. And I think people would be betting this race differently if Baeza would have barely beat him in that race. But he did make a mid-race move, so you got to give him credit for that. But I do think it's meaningful that Sovereignty did pass on this race, and he won the Derby in the slop. And some of the other winners in the slop, when you look at the history of some of the winners of the Preakness, and remember, Justify won the Derby in the slop, and he barely won the Preakness. Remember, it was a 4-horse kind of scramble in the Preakness Stakes, and Good Magic got really close to him in the Preakness. And remember, American Pharaoh, it poured rain right before the Preakness. Now he won, but Orb came back, and he really didn't fire. He won on a sloppy track and came from off the pace. Now, Exaggerator did come back and reverse the tables on Nyquist, but that was kind of a close finish as well. So again, you know, that's why I pick Clever again, but I think there's some people that are going to be picking American Promise, because I think American Promise does like a muddy track if it came up muddy, and he did win at Oaklawn Park in the mud. And I think Clever again could be this year's Cloud Computing. And that's where you're looking at career starts, where Cloud Computing won with 3 lifetime starts. Early Voting won with 3 lifetime starts. What they both have in common is they both had speed. They both went wire to wire. And when you look at the E8, Clever again has been on the lead. He's got 8 speed points. So we'll see if Clever again gets out there early, and some of these closers may not want to close. American Promise could be forwardly placed. So yeah, goal oriented, went from a 98 to a 104. He's got a good distance pedigree. The Mare was a graded stakes winner. Not This Time is a good sire. Not This Time was produced some good turf sire. He's produced some good dirt horses. He's produced some good sprinters. So just overall, Sandman is a little bit more of a grinder. The one thing is, I think Sandman would like a fast pace. And now, again, we did get a fast pace in the Derby. Officially, it was plus 13 at the half-mile pole, which was a 154 on the time form scale, which was faster than last year's Derby pace with Mystic Dan. So journalism caught a fast pace as well in the Derby. So we've seen in years past that the Preakness usually has a slower pace than the Derby. So that's just another thing to consider. I don't think we're going to get the fast pace. And when we don't get the fast pace, horses like Orb and some of these other horses, front runners tend to do a little bit better, like Seize the Gray, Justify, American Pharaoh, California Chrome. They get that slower pace and they seem to run a little bit better in the Kentucky Derby. Now, when you go back to the speed figure progression, Pay Billy had a 97 and a 95. He's got a little bit of speed. And yeah, it's interesting. American Pharoah, the sire of Clever Again, and he's had more turfers and better turfers. His horses in the Derby that were by American Pharoah didn't really fire. So that's something to keep an eye on. And Galileo adds distance and more turf as well. So Heart of Honor is kind of interesting. You know, I think he's going to be long odds, but he does got a nice rest pattern. He had 43 days rest going into the UAE Derby. He's got 42 days rest coming in here. He did ship late, but he's got a little bit of a distance pedigree. And I think a lot of people are going to be down on him because of Admire Daytona and the Japan horse running really bad in the Derby. But I just think both those horses didn't like the track that day. So I'm going to be using Heart of Honor as a trifecta horse. I'm going to use him in that third spot, kind of in that quadrant that Alex likes to talk about as a closer that can grind away for third and fourth. So I'm going to be using Heart of Honor as my third and fourth place horse. So overall, I'm seeing a little bit slower pace of the Preakness. And anybody else, what's your projected pace of the Preakness Stakes compared to the Derby? Remember, a 154 in the Preakness on the time form scale. And anybody else seeing a little bit slower pace in the Preakness than the Kentucky Derby? Because that's what I'm seeing. Carlson says, I didn't bet American Promise at all in the Derby. This time, not off a big effort, 7-week layoff will be different. Andrew says, Clever Again was slated for a turf race before going back to the dirt. But I think we've seen the last 3 years without Lasix for all horses. We're starting to see less formful Triple Crown races. I think we're seeing less. That's why we're seeing 3 straight years with long non-favorites in the Derby, now 4. We're seeing 3 straight years without favorites in the Preakness. We've seen 3 different Belmont winners as non-favorites. I think the non-Lasix is impacting the odds on these horses, and these horses can't turn around on 14 days as quickly. That's just my opinion, looking at these results in the last few years since they switched back to horses not being allowed Lasix. Now, Clever Again did use Lasix in his first start of the year. He didn't use it in the hot springs. Gosger used it in his maiden race, but didn't use it in the Lexington. And what's interesting is Goal Oriented used Lasix in both his races. So Goal Oriented will be running in the Preakness for the first time without any Lasix. Just something to keep a note on it. And then Heart of Honor has never used Lasix. River Thames did not use Lasix in the 2 stakes races, and he's got a little bit more time off. So Alex says journalism shows a classic peak pattern, goal oriented, lightly raced, improving. Clever Again, third off the layoff. I do like the third off the layoff coming in off a top. I do think that it's a good pattern with lightly raced horses, but goal oriented with no Lasix. He ran with Lasix the last 2 times. And Clever Again did use Lasix in that maiden race. So hello to Beeline. Thanks for watching and listening to the Preakness Prospectus. And the 3 horses, of course, coming out of the Derby on the quick turnaround, all are not going to be using Lasix in this race. So when you go back to the Preakness Prospectus, when you look at these favorites, you know, Epicenter kind of flat. He lost after turning around quickly. Medina Spirit lost to an 11-1 shot in Rombauer. Authentic lost to the filly. That was in October. Improbable didn't get the job done in 2019. And then you got to go all the way back to Justify in 2018 for a Preakness favorite. Even Bodemeister, who set the pace in 2012, got caught by I'll Have Another. But Orb was another closer. I'm always leery of closers in the Derby when they come back in the Preakness, because if they caught a fast pace in the Preakness, you just don't know their overall form. So that's why Journalism, who did catch a fast pace in the Preakness, he may not get as fast of a pace here in this race. So I think when we're taking a look at Journalism, again, I think he's going to be right around 4 to 5 even money. I think he's going to probably run about a 101, 102 Beyer speed figure, maybe a 103 Brisnet. And I think that puts him maybe a half a length to 3/4 of a length better than a couple of these horses. But I think Goal Oriented, Clever Again, and Sandman all have the capability to get to that 100 Brisnet level, maybe the 101 Beyer level, if they can improve. So that's why I think it's important to notice that Seize the Gray improved by 12 points. Early Voting improved by 11. Rombauer improved by 14. And War of Will improved by 4 Beyer speed points. So horses can improve in the Preakness. It's very possible. I don't think Journalism wants to be on the lead. I don't think Goal Oriented wants to run too fast, although Bob Baffert does send, and he's got the rail, and he's got Flavian Prat. So I could see 111-3, maybe 112. Silver Charm says American Promise probably going to have the lead, but I'm not so sure. And he very well could. Clever Again could sit second. Goal Oriented could be just saving ground at the rail. So I could see that scenario, but I don't see a scenario where Journalism is going to be on the lead. And if the pace gets a little bit slow, you could get a tightly packed group, and then it could just be who has the fastest late pace ratings. Now, one thing to note, the late pace rating from Brisnet in the Kentucky Derby for Journalism was an 88. So for some reason, they did not give it a very high late pace rating. They gave it just an 88. And last year, Mystic Dan had a 92 late pace rating, and he got beat in the Preakness Stakes. And Journalism ran a 100 plus late pace rating in the San Felipe and in the Santa Anita Derby. So that it's interesting that he only got an 88 late pace rating in the Kentucky Derby. So again, you know, as your handicap, the overall speed figures of the Derby were moderate. They really weren't that outstanding. Like Sovereignty got a good Beyer, but not a great Beyer. He got a good Brisnet. He ran wide, so he got a little bit better Thoroughgraph speed figure. The Ragazin was a good one based on his wide trip, but overall, the Derby speed figure came back just, you know, moderate speed figure, and Journalism running a 102 Beyer, kind of matching up his Santa Anita Derby Beyer speed figure. So the one thing is if it doesn't rain and we get a fast track and the temperatures are very hot and humid in the late 80s or upper 80s, you know, I think we're going to see a little bit slower fractions, and jockeys will try to conserve their energy early on in the race. And that's where it could become a little bit more of a jockey's race. And overall, when you look at some of the jockeys in this race, Mike Smith with a couple of Preakness wins. You know, I put Goal Oriented as a presser because in his maiden race, he came a little bit off the pace. And Journalism is kind of a presser sustain type horse. American Promise, I put him as a presser, but he could be on the lead. I think a couple of you think American Promise is going to be on the lead. I think if it's a sloppy track, he'll be on the lead, and maybe he'll go to the lead. He did draw right outside Journalism. If he breaks well, he could go to the rail and just try to, because Journalism won't fight him for the lead, and he may want to keep Clever Again and River Thames wide in the race. So those are just some of the handicapping factors for the Preakness Stakes. I am going to do a Friday show on the Preakness Stakes. We'll take a look at the pick 5, and we'll also take a deeper dive into the Preakness Stakes. So take a look at the Preakness Prospectus, and we'll come back Friday night and look at the pick 5 and the Preakness Stakes and start to strategize some exacta tickets. Alex is going to send me some betting strategies on the quadrants, and we'll see if we have some quadrant, exacta, and trifecta and super plays from Alex based on the Preakness perspective. So Friday night, we'll do it again at after the Black Eyed Susan, so probably around 6 o'clock on Friday night, we'll take a look at the Preakness and then some of the wagering strategies for Saturday. That's going to do it for the Preakness Prospectus 2025. Thanks again for your support. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share these videos as we get you ready for the Preakness Stakes 2025.